Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Today we'll be talking about why first impressions are extremely important and how to make them. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people mess up their first impressions just because they haven't been paying attention to a few simple things. Our goal in this video is just going to be to make sure you're aware of these simple tactics that you can use to better make an impression upon somebody. First off, why is it important to make a good first impression? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but a couple key reasons are it's basically the foundation that you're setting with this other person that they'll think back on and see you as. So whenever that person will think of you, the first thing that'll pop in their mind is their first interaction with you, and you want to make sure that that interaction is as favorable as possible to you. It's better to start off on the right foot because that way your first impression will be working for you instead of against you. Otherwise, you're going to be having to erase that first impression you made, and that takes a lot more time and effort on your part. Alright, without further ado, let's get started with some tips. This first tip is just going to be choosing who you want to make a good first impression on. So this one is pretty scenario dependent. If you're in a situation where there's only one person that you want to make a good impression on, then that's pretty simple. You've already chosen your person. But if you're in a group with a whole bunch of people, you're going to want to choose only a few people that you want to make a good impression on. Making first impressions takes a lot of energy out of you, especially if you want to make a really good one. What you want to do is conserve your energy because the more people you talk to, the more socially drained you'll be, the less energy you'll have, and that will really show on the next few people that you'll meet. You won't have as much energy, so you won't be able to keep up your happy mood with these other people, and it'll show because your first impressions will also worsen. A general rule of thumb is maybe warm up on somebody that's less important and then start with the most important person and make your way down. That way, that first person that you meet will get the best impression that you possibly have since you are fully energized, and it'll slowly get worse and worse as you meet less and less important people. I'm not saying that you should try less hard, but I am saying that it's just a fact of life. You spend energy, which means you'll be depleted a little bit, and you'll just make a worse impression. Not because you necessarily want to, but because you're just going to be a little bit more tired. This next tip is going to be not forcing situations. What I mean by that is if the situation doesn't arise where you can easily come in and talk to that other person, for example, if that person's really engaged in a conversation with somebody else, just don't come up to them. The best thing you could possibly do is just wait around a little bit, wait for their conversation to end, and then come up to them if they're not doing anything busy. If you come up to them when they're really engaged in a conversation, then they'll always associate you with that one person that ended or interrupted that great conversation they'll have, and immediately you'll be starting off on the wrong foot. It really makes you look desperate, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen people interrupt conversations. It's never a good idea, so it's better to have just not talked to that person than to have made that bad impression. Maybe you'll be able to meet that person on a different day when the circumstances are better. Just try to mitigate that terrible first impression. It's better to just not talk to them than to have made that bad first impression. If that person is talking to somebody and you see that they are really bored, on the other hand, then that might be a good scenario to interrupt the conversation. In that case, they'll look at you more like a savior because you saved them from that really boring conversation, and that way you will already have generated a good first impression with them. So just make sure that you understand that basically all of these tips that I'm going to be giving you are all super situation dependent. So make sure you always keep an open mind. These are just some general rules. There are plenty of exceptions to them. So just make sure you understand that. Another tip I have is when you meet that person, depending on how important they are, you might want to give them a handshake or you might not want to. If they are extremely important, for example, if somebody there is your boss, then you don't want to give them a handshake. You'll want to wait for them to offer to give you a handshake. If you start off the handshake, then it'll indicate that you are the person of power, which means that you're undermining the other person's power. If it's just a regular other person, that's perfectly fine, but if it's somebody higher up than you, then you don't want to be the first person that offers the handshake. If you've gotten the handshake, just say, "It's nice to meet you," or some super generic phrase like that. You really don't want to be too extra because it'll reek of desperation. I've seen plenty of people try to be extra just to stand out a little bit, and they do stand out, but not in a good way. Try to be nonchalant. You don't want to be that person's fan, otherwise they'll treat you like that. Try to be more of an equal. That way they will have more respect for you, and it'll allow you to be yourself more. This next tip is just going to be not being too agreeable. You don't want to be agreeing with every single opinion that that person has, unless you actually agree with it. But in general, you don't want to be agreeing because people will just see you as a lousy pushover. It also sets you up for failure in the future because now, if you've agreed to certain opinions that you generally don't agree with, the next time they'll see you, you'll feel like you need to keep up that facade, and it really just kills you inside every time you see that person, and there'll just be a negative aura because they'll be able to subconsciously feel that you are deceiving them. And just in general, it's usually better to be yourself. It doesn't mean you need to be spouting out all of your controversial opinions, but you also don't need to be agreeing with everything that that other person says. They'll respect you more if you are able to stand your own ground and be yourself. And respect is always something that you want in a relationship. With respect, you're basically setting yourself up with that impression as a strong person. And that's basically all of the initial tips that I have for you. Once you've actually gotten into a conversation or interaction with that other person, you just want to make sure that you are being yourself. Just be genuine. Even if they don't like it, they will at least respect you, and that's much better than being fake. I have a whole video called Ways That You're Selling Your Soul, which goes into this a lot more. I'd recommend watching that if you're interested in this sort of stuff. The most important part about these interactions is just try not to be desperate. Make sure you're being yourself as much as possible. And if there is no good scenario where you can introduce yourself, just don't do it. You'll likely have plenty of other opportunities. You don't need to jump the gun. It's better that they don't know you for a short amount of time than making yourself known but in a bad way. You want to portray yourself as much of an equal as possible, especially if that person is higher up, but at the same time, you don't want to do anything that disrespects them. Okay, well, that's all I have for today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.